All right. Well, welcome everybody. Thank you so much for tuning in today. And I'd like to thank everybody who's making this possible for the College of Biblical Studies and for Chaplain Mike and for Dr. Loken. I do appreciate that. And for everybody who's tuning in, I hope this is worth your while. I want to there's a battle going on all around us. It's a battle between God's truth and Satan's lies. And I think ground zero for that battle is creation versus evolution. And so today like to look at theistic evolution, but I would also like to take a look at boldness. I think we need to be bold in our witness and proclaiming Jesus Christ and standing up to these powers that be. And I think a picture's worth a thousand words, so I will share my screen. And I just love the monarch butterfly. It's the evolutionist's worst nightmare. And we talk about that on my YouTube channel. Ken Ham wrote a book in 2009, already gone. Here's the cliff notes. 61% of our kids stop going to church once they leave home. And the main reason for that is they doubt the Bible's true. And they began to doubt the Bible was true as in middle school and high school, because that's when the Big Bang and evolution are being taught as dogma. And they just figure it's in the science books. That's what I thought. It must be true. I didn't realize that those scientists were using a godless perspective to write those books. And there's a lot of holes in those godless perspectives. And so that was in 2009, and 10 years later, it's not getting any better. 64% of them stopped going to church. So we need 3 Christians to get one into the next generation going to church. And what's causing it? A lot of blame goes at our government education system, which is a godless perspective of the past. It's the perspective of the past is based on blind chance and random collisions of atoms. That's the Big Bang and evolution. And if we get the wrong perspective of the past, we're going to have the wrong perception of the present and a wrong focus on the future. And there's another perspective of the past called a creator. And they tell the kids, hey, it's just blind chance got us here. And it's like thinking these books got put together by blind chance. That's absurd. How much more absurd is it to think our bodies got put together by chance? No, there's another perspective, and it is a creator. So the government education system has a lot of blame, but also the Christian education system. Ken Ham wrote another book called Already Compromised. He targeted 400 Christian higher centers of education, and he wanted to talk to the presidents, deans of academics, science, and theology. Those were the people he wanted to talk to, and he talked to 312 of them, or the survey did. And we found out that 23% do not believe in the inerrancy of the Bible. And so they think there could be errors in there. And then 39% do not believe in a 24-hour day creation. And 43% do not believe in a worldwide flood. And 49% believe the earth is billions of years old. And 10% teach evolution as true. And teaching any form of evolution just shoots yourself in the foot. Because basically it's saying God didn't do what he said. Or at the very least, he didn't mean what he said. And if he didn't mean what he said about creation, maybe he didn't mean what he said about marriage. Maybe he didn't mean what he said about gender. And maybe he didn't mean what he said about salvation even. So that's where the problem is. And let's just take a look at Baylor. Baylor, this is their statement of evolution. Evolution is a foundational principle in modern biology. It is supported by overwhelming evidence and something about majority, and supported by a majority of scientists. And that makes my blood boil on several levels. There are so many logical fallacies and false statements just in that one statement. Evolution is not the foundational principle of modern biology. The Bible is. Everything produces after their kind, just like the Bible says. And it is supported by an overwhelming scientific evidence. Well, now we need to define terms. What do you need by science? And I talk to college kids all the time, and they say, I believe in science, not religion. And I say, well, what do you mean by science? And then we'll get them to the point where science is observation and testing. It's the scientific method type of science. It's observable, testable, repeatable, falsifiable. And I'll say, well, evolution is none of that. And they'll say, sure it is. And I say, okay, what's your best evidence for evolution? And a student said, the moths. They went from light moths to dark moths. And I said, well, what'd you start with? And they said moths. And I said, what'd you end with? And they said moths. I said, that's not evolution. That's just variation within a kind. And so we need to define evolution too. And what I'm talking about is molecules to man evolution, fish to fisherman. And it says the faculty of the biology department at Baylor teach evolution throughout the biology curriculum, and they're within accordance of the advancement of the science statement of evolution. And that's a godless perspective of the past. And so they're teaching a godless perspective of evolution. And then it says, we are a science department, so we do not teach alternative hypotheses or philosophically deduced theories that cannot be tested rigorously. Well, then stop teaching evolution. You can't test that rigorously. And if you can, show me how that fish turns into a fisherman. And then at the top here, it says, their main goal is healing our world. And basically, we are dedicated to the overarching purpose of improving our lives through teaching and research, and something about the challenge in human health. Are they pointing people to Jesus Christ and salvation? Is that the answer? No, you go through that whole thing. They're focused on human health and environmental stewardship. So throughout that whole thing, you didn't see Jesus, the Bible, or God, not once. And I did some poking around on that Baylor website, and it was really hard to find Jesus, God, or the Bible. I thought, is this really a Christian or a university? And it said it was. So, but I'm just wondering what they mean by that, because you could copy and paste this and put them in, change BYU to Brigham Young, and you could have the same thing, because they've been teaching evolution for decades also. And so what's happening? People are believing the lie. Yea, hath God said. Does day really mean day? Was there a gap between Genesis 1 and 2? Maybe God used evolution, and all those different perspectives of how we got here. They all have something in common. They all believe that the fossils are millions of years old. They all believe that there was a local flood, not a worldwide flood, because a worldwide flood would wipe away their geologic column that gives them millions of years. And they also all believe that there was death before sin, which is a big theological problem. And I was on a radio talk show out of Louisiana, and a guy called in and said, well, does the Bible say that man came from the dust of the earth? And I said, yeah. And he said, well, that's what evolution says. Man came from the dust of the earth, and God was communicating to an ignorant people, then they weren't sophisticated enough to understand evolution, so he dumbed it down for them. Man came from the dust of the earth, and evolution is how he did it. And he said, it's just an analogy. And I said, well, the Bible also says that the first man came from the first woman's rib. How does that fit into your analogy? And he didn't. He couldn't answer that. And so, they try and explain all that stuff away. They don't want to use Genesis as history. Even though Jesus referred to Genesis as history, he quotes Genesis 1 and 2 in Mark 8 and Mark 19, I believe. And when he's talking about marriage, and he's referring to it as accurate history. And if we're not referring to Genesis as accurate historical events, then we're not following the example of Jesus. And that's a pretty thin ice, in my opinion. And I say, okay, if you don't want to use Genesis, how about Exodus? Is that an historical event? Or is that poetic? Can we twist those words up too? How about the 10 Commandments? Did God mean that when he wrote it he carved it in stone with his finger? And everybody pretty much agrees we can take that literally. Well, right smack dab in the middle of it, Exodus 20:11, for in 6 days the Lord made heaven and earth, the sea and all that in them is, and rested the seventh day. Okay, 6 days. And then Genesis, it defines the day, and it was evening and morning, the first day, evening and morning, the second day. And that's how we get our pattern for our work week. We work 6 days, or we should work 6 days, take a day off. That's the pattern for a week. I mean, a month has to do with the moon, a year has to do with the orbit around the sun. But what is there for the week? It all points to a creation week. And then 2024 points to Jesus. It used to be BC when it was before Christ. Now they're changing it to BCE, before Common Era. They're doing everything they can to get rid of Christ. And so people ask me, well, how old do you think the earth is? And I say, well, I just agree with Jesus. And they say, what do you mean? I say, well, in Mark 10:6, Jesus said, but from the beginning of the creation, God made them male and female. So that tells us Jesus was a creationist. And not only that, he was a young earth creationist. But from the beginning of the creation, so he's a creationist, God made them male and female. So Adam and Eve are right there from the beginning. They aren't there millions of years later or billions of years later. And so, yeah, I just agree with Jesus. You can disagree with Jesus if you want, but I'm not going to. And another time a woman asked me, she found out I gave these creation evolution talks, and I asked, and she said, well, what side are you on? And I said, creation, how about you? And she said, well, can I say both? And the polite answer there is, no, you can't. You can't say both. Well, why not? Because it's illogical. It breaks laws of logic. You can't, it's the law of non-contradiction. Two opposing things can't be true at the same time in the same way. This computer can't be in this room and outside this room at the same time in the same way. And there's so many things that are backwards according from the Bible to evolution. I mean, the Bible has the earth before the sun. Evolution has the sun before the earth. They have the earth formed under water, and water turns to steam at 200 degrees. And yet they have evolution as earth was a hot molten blob. And newsflash, granite's never been molten. It's made of 4 different types of, it's mica, hornblende, quartz, and feldspar. Yeah, and they all have different specific densities. And if that would have been melted, it would have separated. So granite's never been molten. The Earth's never been molten. And the real big one is the Bible has sin before death. Evolution has death before sin. That's a big theological one. But they do a lot of mental gymnastics. They'll say, well, Adam just couldn't see the sun because there were so many clouds until the 4th day. And they do a lot of mental gymnastics, and they bring him to the whale. Did whales come before land animals, like the Bible clearly teaches, made on day 5 before the land animals on day 6? Or did land animals come after, or did whales come after land animals, like evolution teaches? They say that life started in the water and went onto the land, but life can't start in water. It breaks apart the molecules too fast for life to begin. And a NASA scientist admitted that reluctantly, and that's in one of my talks. But so we'll just humor them with that. So there was a land animal that went back into the sea to make the whale. So it came after land animals. So can you believe that whales came before and after land animals at the same time? So it's a illogical position to believe in both of them. And this is Dr. Jerry Bergman. He was an outspoken atheist, and you can see this on the Twin Cities Creation Science Association's website or on YouTube, TCCSA, and just look for from outspoken atheist to Christian professor. He's got 9 degrees, and he used to write. He knew Madeline Maria O'Hare, and they got along great. And so we went from that to be a strong Christian creationist professor. And listen to what he says to this question. She's going to ask, what do you say to people who would say that God used evolution?
What could we say to fellow believers who say God created through evolution?
Yeah, that's the most common comment I get, because people commonly believe that because I can believe both science and the Bible. The problem is neither science nor the Bible teaches theistic evolution. And the problem is, let's prove evolution first, then let's try to harmonize it with the Bible. And the problem is, clearly, evolution is the doorway to atheism.
Yeah, it's the doorway to atheism. Yeah, and he wrote a book. Darwinism is the doorway to atheism. And he talks about all these professed Christians, they proclaim to do it, and then they learned evolution, and then they turned their back on God. And one of them was Charles Templeton. He was like the Billy Graham. He was right out there preaching the gospel, saving souls. And then he went to Princeton and learned evolution. And then he wrote this book, Farewell to God. And it's quoted as saying it's simply not possible any longer to believe, for instance, the biblical account of creation. The world wasn't created over a period of days a few thousand years ago. It has evolved over millions of years. It's not a matter of speculation. It's a demonstrable fact. Okay, well, prove it. Show me how that life came, how planets form without, that, because things break apart. They don't stick together. Those rings of Saturn aren't making moons. Those asteroid belts aren't making planets. So it's a belief system about the past, and it's the wrong perspective. And then Jerry Bergman, he also wrote another book, and he's got like 1,000 titles published. But it's Science is the Doorway to the Creator. And he talked about all these people, that's really smart people that came to a creator because of science. And then there's a book in 6 days where 50 scientists and all their expertise and their certain fields of study point to a creator. Okay, that's theistic evolution. Let's take a look at boldness. This is Dr. Phil Stringer. He's got a big long things. He was president of college. He's been a pastor. He's at the East Spring Bible College. And I interviewed him. I've only interviewed 2 people in my life, and he's one of them. And I wanted to get this on tape because he stood up to the government in 3 different states because the government was trying to control the church, the Christian schools, the churches, and the Christian colleges. And he stood up to them. And here he's a president of a college down in Florida, and Florida wants to regulate all the colleges. And they said, okay, we're going to do this. And he talked to his pastor, and they decided, we're not obeying that law. The state has no right to tell us how to run a college. And so he basically said, we have no right, or, we're not going to obey that law. And let's let you talk about what happened.
They sent a letter saying, cease and desist. So I called the Department of Education. I said, okay, you sent your letter. What do you do now? And they said, well, he asked to shut the college down. We sent him a letter. I said, y'all don't know much about Baptist history. I said, our people have been burned at the stake, fed to the lions, shot by firing squads, drowned. We don't necessarily jump because we got a letter. Ball's in your court now. And I said, what are you going to do?
Yeah, what are you going to do? And then he goes on to say, and I encourage everybody to listen to this. It's an hour long. I'm just giving you some clips. And he goes on to say, are you going to send the county police or the state police? And once you arrest that president of the college, because they're picking on the tiny, teeny college. That's not his college. They're picking on a small college. And he says, once you arrest that president, they said, I'm going to be the president. And if you arrest me, you're going to have to arrest 4 or 5 other guys. He says we're 6 or 7 deep. And once you start arresting them, we're going to get even deeper. And they didn't know what to do with them. And then he said, and what's this going to look like in an election year when you're arresting all these pastors? And so he kind of held their feet to the fire, and they didn't know what to do. And you would think it would be a liberal administration, but it was Jeb Bush's administration that was trying to control the colleges. And then he would say, and he would say, on our best day, we won't know how to train a bureaucrat, but on your best day, you don't have idea how to train a pastor or missionary or a preacher. You train the bureaucrats, we'll train the pastors. And then he goes on to,
I can't tell how many times some government bureaucrats, the Bible says render to Caesar the things that are Caesar's.
Yep.
They never finish the phrase. Render to Caesar the things that are Caesar's. That is a legitimate Bible principle.
Yep.
But unto God, the things that are God's.
Right.
Which clearly implies some things don't belong, not implies, states, some things don't belong to Caesar.
Right.
Some things belong directly to God. Christ says, well, whose image is on the coin? It's Caesar's. Well, let's stick with the image illustration for a minute. Whose image is on your church? Your church is the body of Christ.
Amen.
It's not Caesar's.
Right.
Or, whose image is on your children?
Right.
All right, you can answer that 2 ways. Your children are created in the image of God.
Yep.
But also, very often, your image is on your children.
Yeah.
I've seen a lot of children. You think, well, I know who your mom and dad are.
Right.
And that's not Caesar's. Children do not belong to Caesar. The ultimate battle of the moment, I think it's the battle that everybody should put at the top in coming elections. Every politician should be asked, who do you believe children belong to?
Right.
Society, government, educational establishment, however you want to phrase it, or their parents.
Right.
I'm not supporting any politician in any setting or any level that is not crystal clear that children belong to their parents.
And then he went on to say that there's been a court case that said the kids belong to the education system so they can do their transgender things. So he went on to say that. But then he kind of concludes with this.
We have a heritage of religious liberty because we have a heritage of people that fought for religious liberty.
Yes.
Not because we have a heritage of people who said, I don't really want to get in trouble.
Right.
I don't want any difficulty.
Right.
And we have to develop that again. And the reason people are starting to wake up is because the state's going so far.
Right.
People didn't think it would go this far.
Right. Yeah, they kind of tip their hands on what they're capable of doing.
And I kind of think, I hope, may I be right before the Lord. I think maybe they went too far too quick, and they're waking everybody up.
Yep.
Yeah, we do. We need to stand up and say there's a separation of church and state. And he actually wrote the law in Florida that is still in place today. Basically, it's if you got a Christian name and a Christian purpose, and you don't take any money from the state, they don't tell you what to do. And because what they were doing, they were changing the size of the waste baskets inside the classroom. That's how they were regulating things. And again, I encourage you to listen to this talk. It's an hour long, and you would enjoy it. But what can we do? And I think people do need to be involved in politics. I think we do need to get the laws changed. And now he's trying to change it in Illinois. They want the state to control the Christian colleges for the homosexuals. We got to make sure they can get in there. And so that's where he's coming from. But what can we do locally? What can we do personally? I think that every county fair should have a creation booth. And then just ask people, hey, what came first, the chicken or the egg? And just do a survey as they walk by. It's so much fun. And then post the results and ask another question like, how did life begin, or where did matter come from? And, did hydrogen and helium turn into people? Because that's what evolutionists believe. Or if you don't have God, hydrogen and helium from the Big Bang turned into people. And so that's what you can do at the county level or a county fair. This is what we do at our college. Our church rented kiosks so that we could take surveys and the students could tell us what they believed. You believe in one God, many God, not, and just it went through. And then in there it says, what do you think your personal chances of making it to heaven are? And if they don't circle 100%, when we're all done, we'll ask them, would you want to see from the Bible how you can be 100% sure of going to heaven? And if they say yes, then we share the gospel with them. And it's a neat way to meet people. And it's a neat way to get their emails. And then we just try and have a lot of fun with our creation clubs. And this is, there's some people from Nepal and Africa, and it was rather an effective way to do that. If you want to learn more about that, that's what I talked on Sunday morning in Sunday school, reaching college students. So in a week or so, that should show up on my YouTube channel. And this is my YouTube channel. We got Creation Science 101, where we're going through the basics. And I encourage you to watch the Creation Science 104, where that's breaking news. Dr. Carl Werner, he spent 27 years going around the world taking photographs of fossils and comparing them to living fossils and interviewing the scientists who found them. And he falsifies evolution twice. And then he said he found 150 frauds in human evolution. And this stuff just got released in March. 3 volumes and 6 videos released in March. So if you haven't seen the human evolution stuff in a while, watch that one. Because mistaking a pig tooth for an ape-man tooth, like Nebraska man, he says that's not fraud, that's a mistake. But what is a fraud is lying about when you found it and also hiding the pig jaw from the public. Okay, and other things, this is what I do. When I work on these talks, I go to St. Cloud State and I have a sign. I try to put posters, but they make me take the posters down. So I'll have a sign, Jesus died for you, and where's your faith? Blind chance or God. And then students sometimes come up and talk. And one came up, we talked for an hour, and he wants to help start a creation club. And another one came up the next day and we talked. And so I basically sometimes they'll ask, what are you doing here? It's like, hey, I just want to give you an opportunity to think. You need to see both sides if you want to think, but that's not happening in class. You're only going to get the blind chance perspective in class. And also I'll go and ask, I love doing these marker board things, asking questions. How did we get here? Creation in 6 days, evolution in millions of years, or intelligent design, or don't know. And this is St. Cloud State. I figured St. Cloud State would win in a landslide, or evolution would win, but it didn't. It was really close. In spite of all the trillions of dollars and generations of brainwashing they're doing, people aren't buying it. And then this is, for sake of time, I'll just, somebody said I was an answer to prayer. They were praying for somebody, and they pray that a Christian would come and speak to them and have a conversation. And she said, I believe he's been watching your videos because he shared one with me. I thought, great, that's encouraging. Which video did he show you? And she said it was the hydroplate one, which I couldn't believe. It was during COVID, and I got to talk to the Rotary Club. And it was during COVID, and the doors were open. It was bad sound, and I edited it out, and it wasn't very good quality. But that was the one. It was the content. And you're going to be able to hear about the hydroplate. Oh, yeah, it was actually $280, the last one on Amazon. It was a $30 book new, and now it's $280, and somebody bought it because it's not there anymore. And you're going to be able to hear that, let's see, on tomorrow night at 6 p.m. Is 6 or is it at 7? No, tomorrow night at 7 p.m. at Grace Bible Church. Pete flew me down here specifically to give the hydroplate talk. And you're going to learn why the moon's beat up on the near side instead of the far side. That shouldn't be that way. And then also tonight I'm going to be talking to the youth group and at Christ Church Baptist. And I'm going to show them a lot of videos that get them up to speed and websites. Because if I come down and just give them information, they eat for a day. But if I can show them where the information is and it's entertaining, then I think we've got something. So again, my YouTube channel is Solidify Your Faith. And my website is solidifyyourfaith@hotmail.com. And then I just want to thank you, College of Biblical Studies. I do appreciate this opportunity. It's just been a tremendous pleasure to be able to talk with you. So thanks for tuning in.